Rhetoric, when people state their opinion as a fact and use hyperbole and superlatives to sound more confident and convincing, which I think is done in a way sleazier way than I would like. Hello, and welcome back to the It Be What It Be podcast, powered by StreamYard, as you can see right over here. And we are going to be talking about the Trivium Part 3. So, as you can see from the title of this particular YouTube video, the liberal arts and the lost art of the trivium, grammar, logic, and rhetoric. I've spoken ad nauseum at this point about grammar. Logic is going to be coming in future videos, and rhetoric I'm going to be speaking about today. As I tend to like to do, wanted to just make sure that you are aware that there certainly has been some progress that's been made on the YouTube channel. As you can see, there is a multitude of different shorts now. At this rate, there are 19 different shorts. So I've really been working quite a bit to try to have at least one, if not two shorts a day. And the channel's growing. I'm so ecstatic for that. I mean, some of the first videos, you could see that there were not that many views for them. But then the first video that I had that started to blow up was my problem with indirect societies, 248 views on that one. And then from there, I started to have a few other shorts that were really picking up. Debates don't have to be fights, even though, unfortunately, in my opinion, a lot more people than I would like end up being quite antagonistic in the way that they interact with different ideas. So many people are linguistically lazy. That one over here, 435 views. That is still to this day my most viewed short on YouTube. And I definitely am an advocate for articulating. That was definitely a part of grammar, as I was saying, that there's a lot about grammar that I was saying, or that I was creating shorts about ad nauseum. And even human struggle at saying no, absolutely, 328 views. Indirect society set us up for failure with a bit of clapping like that. And absolutely that there's so much that is going on, particularly when interacting with other people and a lot of the different political and social games that we have to play. Because if we operate as though the game doesn't quite exist, I'll squeeze in a bit closer here. If we operate as though the game doesn't exist, we could be taken advantage of. So that's one thing. You could pretend the game doesn't exist or operate as if the game doesn't exist, get taken advantage of. You could suck at the game and you could lose and get taken advantage of as well. You could walk away from the game, but then you tend to cut off economic opportunities and opportunities to be able to make money or to be able to get what it is that you want out of a social situation or out of an interpersonal situation. I don't say social situations necessarily. I also explain that one in the social interactions of a dark side video as well. This one right over here. And you could get good at the game as well. That being said, I mean, I definitely think that it kind of depends. I don't necessarily want to step on other people, but at the same time, I'm more than happy to advocate for myself. So, yes, 408 views. And yes, advocating for myself or one advocating for oneself, because the only person that's going to have your back 100% is you. The only person that you could trust 100% is you. And as a byproduct of all of that, it really is at the end of the day up to you to sing your own praises, because other people are not necessarily going to do that for you. Not everybody cares about you. Not everyone cares about you. Got 100 views. As I was saying, social interactions have a dark side. And then there are some of the two newer shorts that I put up that have not had that much attention. So I would like to encourage more attention to go to the shorts. I would certainly encourage you to take a look. And if you like them, by all means, please give us a like and share them, comment, subscribe as well. We've grown in subscribers. Now we have 9 subscribers and 22 videos, even though we only have 19 different shorts. There are more videos that in terms of the live streams that I've done. And I've also now started to have some thumbnails be put in. So I'm pretty proud of myself with that, actually getting some more proper thumbnails. So some development going on the YouTube channel where we are unveiling and addressing the mechanics of people, interpersonal interactions, societal influences, and life in general. Because throughout my life, many people would claim that intangibles are not quantifiable and that situations in life just happen and that it is impossible to be articulated or put into words. That never sat well with me. Hence, here I am sharing some of what I've discovered while continuing to learn more along the way, and also while not letting the behaviors of the Homo sapien species as a whole off the hook. Partially why I want to wear a mask, because I'm definitely going to be making some species wide criticisms, and I don't necessarily want to end up homeless, in jail, or unalived because I offended somebody else. And I also added in that there's some people that have inspired my content, which include Robert Greene. I talked about Robert Greene and the daily laws in some of my shorts, as well as in my last live stream, episode 2. Ryan Holiday, or the Daily Stoic, Mark Manson, Chris Williamson. I spoke about Chris Williamson in the episode 1 as well. He had talked about toxic compassion, or he would have gotten that idea, I suppose, from one of his guests, and then now that's been implemented into his ethos. So there's that. Dr. Orion Turban, or Psych Hacks, and more. We have an Instagram, Threads, Twitter, Blue Sky, and TikTok. In fact, let's see if we can do this. Take a look at let's take a look at the Instagram. And you'll notice on the Instagram over here that all majority of the reels have gotten over 100 views, which I'm pretty proud of as a pretty small channel. Unfortunately, well, the first one, it makes sense, 40 views. The third one, only 56. One of them, unfortunately, just didn't really go that far at all. 0 views. I'm not too sure what happened, but nonetheless, it does look like I've been able to reach quite a few people. No followers yet, unlike 9 subscribers on YouTube. But also, what I am the absolute most proud of, although it is somewhat controversial, would be my TikTok progress. And so over here, you'll notice that with TikTok, I actually have more than 9 subscribers. In fact, on my TikTok, I have 12 followers. And what I also am really appreciative of when it comes to TikTok is that I've actually gotten the most traction from TikTok. With TikTok, I've actually been able to get 291. Well, it started off pretty slow with the first 2, then 291. And then I have multiple videos over 800. In fact, out of my 19 shorts or reels or TikToks, whatever you want to call them, the amount that I have that are over 9,000, excuse me, over 800 would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 697, I think is pretty impressive still. 6, 7, 8, 9, almost at over 800, but it is what it is. But 9 in that regard. And there's still, I think the last 2 suffered from some of the looming threats that were happening to TikTok. But nonetheless, TikTok has definitely been my most successful platform. And even one of the TikToks, I know that I saw this one somewhere, so I'm going to make sure that I try to get this one for you all if I can. Yes, okay, I figured out what I am doing. And one of my TikToks, particularly the one about humans struggling to say no, ended up getting 35 likes. So I'm very happy about that. And so that is just essentially to show that these are some of the other accounts that I encourage you to follow me on by all means. Follow me on Instagram, follow me on TikTok, and of course, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Yes, indeed. Now, with that being said, I wanted to make more of an effort just to jump straight into it. The thumbnail of the video talks about learning the fundamentals, which definitely the Trivium and grammar, logic, and rhetoric, I would say, are some of the fundamentals with this YouTube channel. With the live streams that I have, I wanted to start at the beginning. And you'll also notice that it says rhetoric and how it has been corrupted, essentially. And so that's definitely going to be a lot of what it is that I want to talk about, because just like I was saying in the beginning, I think that the way that people try to sound more confident and convincing is done in a way sleazier manner than I would like. But first, I think that it is important to establish a foundation for rhetoric. And so I do have a video here to be able to help with establishing that foundation, so long as there's no.
It's 2025. Why are you still using your phone's notes app?
There are, in fact, there are, in fact, ads, but I'm going to skip this one. And here we go. 3 persuasive appeals: logos, ethos, and pathos. So let's take a look at what it is that we have here, and let's get straight into the content. And I would have
the 3 persuasive appeals: logos, ethos, and pathos. 2,300 years ago, famous philosopher Aristotle argued that there were 3 ways to persuade someone. And these 3 persuasion appeals are the same modes of persuasion used today by politicians, advertisements, and public speakers alike. The first persuasive.
So I think that that's very interesting that, it came from Aristotle, and that certainly, as I was saying, that they're used by advertisement, salesmen, politicians alike as well. And so let's dive deeper into it.
Public speakers alike.
Public speakers, advertisement, politicians, yeah.
The first persuasive appeal is logos, or logical appeal. Logos is persuading by appealing to one's logical side through reason, often through facts, statistics, charts, and graphs.
Let me see here.
The second persuasive appeal
is... before that, so let's just go with logos. So charts.
Graphs.
So appealing to one's logical sides through charts and statistics, graphs as well. And just what else?
One's logical side through reason, often through facts, statistics, charts, and graphs.
Facts, statistics, charts, and graphs. So logos, logic, by all means, trying to make a logically valid and a logically sound argument. And I'm definitely going to be talking a lot more about logic, as it is a part of the Trivium. Absolutely, grammar, logic, and rhetoric, but I'll be talking about that in some of the future videos. But I do think that it is very interesting that if somebody is trying to be persuasive and is trying to encourage someone to agree with their point of view, or what it is that they may be purporting or stating, or in the more corrupted sense, to get someone to do what it is that you want them to do, that trying to present an argument that is logically valid, in that when you have a premise, that you are able to validly do deductive reasoning to come to a valid conclusion. So, for example, let's just say people eat would be the premise. People eat. Women are people, therefore women eat. Right? Like that would be a deductively valid argument But it is possible, like I could say, people eat, women are people, therefore beavers eat, which isn't necessarily untrue, but it's just that doesn't follow the deductive reasoning. Because now my conclusion introduces this new entity, beavers, that has nothing to do with the action of eating or the entity of women that I had introduced before. Then there's also an argument that can be valid, but that would not necessarily be sound. So people fly, women are people, therefore women fly. You know, the premise is not true, even though it's deductively valid. And so that's that with logic for the time being.
The second persuasive appeal is ethos or credibility appeal. Ethos is persuading by establishing that the persuader is trustworthy, often through showing where one's information came from or by using an expert or testimonial.
So I definitely think that this is very important as well. I definitely do think that there's a part of logic that is insufficient because logic does not account for someone's intentions. So say for example, one example that I really love to use, if you have an elevator, right? Let's just say that you have an elevator and the elevator is going to stop at whatever floors it is told to stop at based off of whatever buttons are pushed. If there's one person in the elevator and then that one person just pushes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, they push all 10 buttons in this hypothetical elevator that only has 10 buttons. They push all 10 buttons, but the elevator only has one person in it. Well, it can be, I do believe it to be fair to conclude that the one person is not going to get off on all 10 floors. And so, therefore, as a byproduct, that the logic, because it is logical for, a person pushed to get off on this, a person, a person pushed a particular floor. Therefore, the elevator ought to stop at that floor. But that doesn't account for the person's intentions. If this person is trying to stir some feces, if you will, which I'm just trying to say in an attempt to not, in an attempt to just not say something that is so potentially frowned upon by the YouTube algorithm. I'll just say, someone's trying to stir some feces, then that's going to result in the logic neglecting the actual personality characteristics of that actual person. One thing I really like about logos is that logos starts with the letter L and so does logical, but ethos and pathos, you know, ethos for personality essentially, and then pathos for emotions, which is about to be stated. And what I like to do is that I say L logic logos. And then as far as ethos and pathos goes, I just take the first letter and I switch them in my mind so that I know that ethos is P for personality and that pathos is E for emotions. That being said, we'll rehash what she said.
Showing where one ethos is persuading. The second persuasive appeal is ethos or credibility appeal. Ethos is persuading by establishing that the persuader is trustworthy, often through showing where one's information came from or by using an expert or testimonial.
So definitely the credibility and whether or not someone is actually trustworthy, I certainly believe that to be very important as well, especially if someone is trying to have a conversation with someone. And like I say, debates don't have to be fights. And if someone is trying to have a conversation with somebody else and one side is being bad faith or is competing and the other side is being good faith or collaborating, then the competitor or the bad faith side that's essentially willing to lie to win or be disingenuous essentially and more or less ignorant and closed-minded going into the conversation, that side's going to automatically win essentially, especially since they're being competitive. And so therefore I think it's very important to only talk to people who are and debate people who are being good faith, who are being intellectually curious when they're entering into the conversation with the other person, and at the same time that are willing to cooperate authentically as well. And ideally, there's a safe space where if someone were to if someone were to be wrong, essentially, that, and I said this before as well, pretty sure that I did, that essentially if someone was wrong, I'm going to see if I can. Yes. Not quite. No. Okay. I maybe have to pivot or just rephrase the point. Figured that I had it here somewhere in my notes, but essentially all I'm just trying to say is that I would like the debating ideas to be able to be a situation or a process where people talk out and brainstorm and they try to figure out collectively whatever may be the best way to move forward. But some people either just want to get what they want, or some people are completely ignorant to what it is that someone has to say. I think some people really believe in experience hierarchies and, only listen to people who are where you want to be, and they have this mentality that I think is absolutely incorrect, of essentially saying it without saying it, that it's absolutely impossible for someone who is less experienced than me to make a correct diagnosis and a correct prescription that improves the other person's quality of life in a way that is way better than they could have thought of themselves or from other people that they asked. I also do think that people who have a certain level of experience, generally as people get older, then they become more set in their ways, they can become more tunnel vision in that regard. And so I do think that there is a lot of merit to someone coming in with a fresh perspective. So that being said, then there is pathos.
The last persuasive appeal, and often the most effective, is pathos, or emotional appeal. Pathos is persuading by appealing to one's emotions and by creating an emotional response, such as sadness or happiness.
So definitely there is also going to be means to appeal through that as well. I mean, certainly people being caught up in their feelings, if you will, and that there is a certain level of emotion, I do think, when, I mean, barring that someone isn't completely socially or interpersonally neglectful, which some people are. And in a lot of ways, appealing to someone's humanity is not as effective as appealing to their best interest as well. So, in terms of trying to persuade people, I think that that one can be a tricky one. And I don't necessarily agree that it is the most effective. However, this video did come out 8 years ago on October 20th, 2016. So Barack Obama was still president. I hope that's not controversial for me to say, but nonetheless.
It is also important to note that good persuaders keep in mind the target audience when using logos, ethos, and pathos. This is called audience awareness. After all, it wouldn't make sense to show a toy commercial during a late-night talk show. In the end, it's important to use a balance of all three persuasive appeals. This will keep your audience engaged while keeping their trust in you.
I think that that's very important. One more time.
It's engaged while keeping their trust in you.
So I definitely think that it's important to trust the person that you're talking to. Certainly important to engage them, getting them to encouraging or eliciting emotions within them as well. And that also the points that are being made are quite valid and that are follow that are also sound as well, valid and sound as well, so that they follow deductive reasoning, doing it properly, but also that have true premises as well. And so let's finish the video.
So next time you're aiming to persuade someone, use all 3 persuasive appeals. Then you can tell everyone you're cool like Aristotle.
So yeah, absolutely. Now, I'm just going to let that replay one more time, especially just without my box in there in the bottom left corner. I just really want to hammer it in these particular points. I'm going to let this rock just one more time.
The 3 persuasive appeals: logos, ethos, and pathos. 2,300 years ago, famous philosopher Aristotle argued that there were 3 ways to persuade someone. And these 3 persuasion appeals are the same modes of persuasion used today by politicians, advertisements, and public speakers alike.
I just wanted to just stop right there just to make sure, well, part of it's also that I just don't want to necessarily get a copyright just in case, but just to reinforce, just how a lot of this was established. I mean, a lot of the Greek philosophy and just how it is still relevant to the modern day. I just think that that's really cool, but nonetheless.
Advertisements and public speakers alike. The first persuasive appeal is logos, or logical appeal. Logos is persuading by appealing to one's logical side through reason, often through facts, statistics, charts, and graphs. The second persuasive appeal is ethos, or credibility appeal. Ethos is persuading by establishing that the persuader is trustworthy, often through showing where one's information.
So I really also like that as well in terms of like the credibility appeal. So certainly, yeah, the personality, I think that that's very, very important as well.
Information came from, or by using an expert or testimonial. The last persuasive appeal, and often the most effective, is pathos, or emotional appeal. Pathos is persuading by appealing to one's emotions and by creating an emotional response, such as sadness or happiness.
So yeah, I definitely do think that that's very important to be able to engage people and to keep them interested, as I was saying, eliciting emotional reactions for sure. And to also trying to not make people feel bad, but I also think that there is a limit to the extent that someone else is responsible for the emotions of another. Because part of this too, is that I don't think that people ought to use emotions as this like infinite excuse that, you know, I think that they're all important, but I'm also just not a fan of logic being thrown out the window because of emotions. Just because someone's upset doesn't mean that they can do whatever they want. I would not condone or think that someone being upset means that now all of a sudden it is excusable for them to initiate a physical fight, like a fist fight, for you then to box someone else, or like even to the extent of trying to take out their anger on a school. I'll put it that way, and to be armed to do so. I'll just put it that way. So this may not be something that you may like to hear, but facts are facts regardless of your feelings. And I do think that it is possible to manage and better understand emotions and how they drive our behavior as well. So I think that that's all going to be very important as well. And that ultimately, as I was saying, well, I'll let it rock for a little bit longer.
It is also important to note that good persuaders keep in mind the target audience when using logos, ethos, and pathos. This is called audience awareness. After all, it wouldn't make sense to show a toy commercial during a late-night talk show. In the end, it's important to use a balance of all 3 persuasive appeals.
And yeah, okay, I'll let it finish.
This will keep your audience engaged while keeping their trust in you. So next time you're aiming to persuade someone, use all 3 persuasive appeals. Then you can tell everyone you're cool like Aristotle.
Alrighty, so yeah, I just at the very end of it, just a note that I had that was just about how At the end of the day, I think that being proven wrong can be looked at as an being proven wrong can be looked at as inadequacy, but I'd rather look at it as getting closer to the truth and not as an opening to personally shame someone as well. So those are just something that I just definitely wanted to address too. And throughout my life, I've noticed that rhetoric has been used to present opinions like a fact. So this is definitely one thing that I wanted to address, and I just trying to continuously. I just don't want my mouth to get caught up, especially with the some of the liquid marks that are showing up over here. But nonetheless, that one of the things that I do think is really unfortunate is, yeah, the way that like people present their opinions like a fact. And say, for example, someone was to say, there's the recent elections in the United States. So someone was to say the great Kamala Harris or the amazing Donald Trump. Essentially, you can determine someone's values through their rhetoric. However, I also think that people are generally very careless in their rhetoric in that they don't care to present their opinion as an opinion. Now, before I get there, so, yeah, the great Kamala Harris, the amazing Donald Trump. If these are just phrases that I'm saying, I'm not necessarily reinforcing that. All of what it is that I am trying to say is that when you hear someone say that, you know, what I'm trying to get at is that you can tell from their rhetoric that, oh, this person likes Kamala Harris, or oh, this person likes Donald Trump because of the way that they're speaking about them. The great Kamala Harris, the amazing Donald Trump, that some people could say that a particular movie, this is also kind of this bleeds into the other part, where they're saying the other part of what it is that I have to say when in terms of presenting an opinion as a fact instead of an opinion as an opinion. So someone could say that the Sonic the Hedgehog trilogy is a good trilogy, you know. And look, I liked it, and that's what I'm saying because I really want to encourage people to present their opinion as an opinion instead of their opinion as a fact. So I recommend that people say I think or I feel or in my opinion before their statement, not after, because some people do say the Sonic the Hedgehog trilogy was good, I think. In terms of it's almost like they forgot to present their opinion as an opinion and they're doing it only towards the end of their statement as opposed to leading with that, you know. And there's some problems with that in terms of the way that it can be interpreted by other people. So as I was saying, before their statement to say I think, I feel, or in my opinion, to give you some examples. But it does disappoint me that some may interpret that as a lack of confidence in one who speaks this way. And it's interpreted as a lack of confidence because, to an extent, like it's not someone speaking assertively. So, speaking assertively, in fact, if I was to try and let me see here. I want to see if I can try and find this. So, I like this. I like this a lot. I'm going to show this one over here, and we're going to bring this one back up. So let's see. Let's try this. That is quite small. There we go. So you may be able to see up on your screen over there. No, okay, I'll make it bigger. Put myself back in there. So having or showing a confident and forceful personality, and that definitely is like assertive in terms of an assertive personality or an assertive person, and even this right here. Being assertive means communicating with others in a direct and honest manner without intentionally hurting anyone's feelings. Direct communication can reduce conflict, but self-confidence and build self-confidence and enhance personal and work relationships. Assertiveness is a skill that anyone can learn. And I really like that. I really like that. I definitely am an advocate of direct communication as well. And certainly being quite honest as well. I certainly am an advocate of that. But I think it's sort of interesting that, confident and forceful, because an assertive, or rather, let me try something else. What is assertive speaking? Let's try this. Assertive speaking is a way of communicating that is clear, direct, and respectful. It involves expressing your needs and feelings while still considering the feelings of others. So I like that. They talk about be clear, state your needs and feelings in a way that is easy to understand, avoid belittling or dismissing others' opinions, use a firm voice and maintain eye contact, give your full attention to the speaker and show empathy, communicate in a way that feels natural to you. You when to use assertive speaking when you need to express your boundaries, when you need to confront someone about a conflict or challenge. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I like how they say also communicating in a assertive manner can help you to minimize conflict, control anger, have your needs better met. Absolutely. And a lot of it too, I'll go back to this one. One of the things of what it is that I'm trying to say and trying to get at also is that when people are being assertive and when they are or when they're speaking assertively, they often are making assertions as well. Such as, for example, to say that the Sonic the Hedgehog trilogy was good. But I do think that that actually does not, according to the other definition, you know, I do not think that that is speaking in a way that is considerate of the feelings of others. And I don't mean the feelings in terms of the emotions, but I mean in terms of the opinions of others. Because when I'm saying like this is good, the Sonic the Hedgehog trilogy is good, or if I say spicy food is good, someone else might not agree with that, right? Someone else might not agree that the Sonic the Hedgehog trilogy was good. Some people think that Joker Folie à Deux was good, even though I absolutely disagree with that. I really didn't like that as a follow-up movie to the Joker. $1 billion movie is finally getting a sequel, and this is the sequel that we got. I mean, I definitely think that it was a fu to the fans of the original movie, absolutely. But nonetheless, taking everything that was people generally liked with the original movie and flushing it down the toilet, I'm pretty disappointed by that, but yet it is what it is. Nonetheless, I definitely do think that what I'm trying to get at, is that in order to make space for other people's feelings, not just their necessarily emotions, but also their opinions as well, I would prefer that people state their opinion as an opinion as opposed to an opinion as a fact. And to distinguish, I mean, for example, drinking tap water is not always good for you depending on where you are in the world. Like, that's a fact, like, apparently the tap water in the Philippines can cause someone to have bowel movements that they may not prefer. And you'll notice that the waste that exits their body is more liquid than it ought to be. Particularly the waste that exits their body from their rear end, regardless of what your anatomy or genitalia are. So for example, that's going to be something that's actually a fact. Something like there are fires in California. That's not my opinion that there are fires. There are fires in California. But something that's an opinion. I mean, spicy food versus non-spicy food, something like what is the best sauce, or those are all preferences. Even I would even go as far as to say that there is no such thing as an objectively attractive or hot person. To people tend to define objective attractiveness on the basis of a consensus, which is an ad populum fallacy. A consensus, or whatever may be popular, whatever we all agree on, or whatever we all like. I'm not for that at all. I definitely do think that it is an opinion, and I don't think that collective subjective equals objective. Absolutely not. Nonetheless, the whole point there is just to be able to encourage people to present their opinion as an opinion instead of their opinion as a fact. But I would also like to encourage that whenever someone says I think, or I feel, or in my opinion, because some people say I think, it's like you think, you don't know. Well, it's my opinion, A, and B, for example, yes, in some cases, I think, I don't know. Nobody actually knows the future. I mean, whenever there's an election that's happening, we don't actually know who's going to win. For example, TikTok, right? Sure, the United States Supreme Court is upholding the ban on TikTok. Absolutely fine, sure. But we don't necessarily know whether or not TikTok is actually what Donald Trump is going to do with it, and whether or not it will be sold to a United States company. I don't know if Elon Musk is going to buy it. I don't know if Mr. Beast is going to buy it. I don't know. I can have a prediction. I can say, I think this will happen or this will not happen, but I don't know. And one of the other parts too, I don't think you know either. Some people like, I know. I don't think you know. So I just want to make sure that that's out there as well, because I think that some people are way too presumptive with their assertions, and frankly arrogant and egotistical with them at that. And so that just leads on to another concept that I wanted to talk about, which is about virtue. And I'll be putting that over here. Virtue Virtue is a trait of excellence, including traits that may be moral, social, or intellectual. The cultivation and refinement of virtue is held to be the good of humanity, and thus is valued as an end purpose of life or a foundational principle of being. Behavior showing high moral standards, even though I'm going to just outright say I don't necessarily believe in objective morality, because morality seems to be more or less a human construct. And so morality can be established from a religion, for example, even though, like I said, I don't believe in religion. I don't believe in God. I follow my life under a secular path. I'm agnostic at most. I don't know that there isn't a God. I don't know. I'm just follow my life on a secular path. At the same time, I don't reject everything that religion has to offer. I grew up Catholic and went to a Catholic elementary and high school. And at the same time, I do think that there's a lot of merit to what religion has to offer. Certainly, it gives someone a blueprint as to how they ought to move forward in their life. And at the same time, it has certain elements such as the seven. I don't know if it's okay for me to say this word, but the seven sins. I don't want to say the middle word just in case on YouTube. And I'd even add entitlement to that list, as well as certain concepts such as treat others the way you want to be treated, to try to establish empathy in the way that other people are, in the way that one treats other people, although not everybody wants to be treated the way that you want to be treated, you know? And so ultimately, I mean, let's see more. A lot of it has well, there's a few statements here that have to do with morality, a good or useful quality of a thing, and don't think that all of that is particularly relevant, but virtue essentially. And I'm even going to go further with that with this next YouTube video and the final YouTube video for this live stream. I'm trying to get more concise with these live streams.
Life is full of distractions,
And
like this clarinet solo. But
at all, I am not interested. I mean, I certainly want to get. Ooh, and I never really actually even. I never liked the video. Ooh, and now it is starting. There we go. So I'm going to take away this, the closed captions. Going to make sure that we are. Yep. And I'm going to like the video. And I'm going to maximize, make a full screen, and we are going to start from the beginning. So this is from Crash Course Philosophy. Really like this, what it is that it has to say about Aristotle and virtue theory. So yet another conclusion of Aristotle's that I think is very relevant in the modern day as well. Like I said, one of my inspirations for a lot of what it is that I'm doing is the Daily Stoic, and how Ryan Holiday talks a lot about Stoicism, which is largely from Marcus Aurelius, and how some of what he thought about is relevant today as well. But nonetheless, the human experience, the Homo sapien experience, I love it. But nonetheless, I digress.
Imagine a person who always knows what to say, who can diffuse a tense situation, deliver tough news gracefully, is confident without being arrogant, brave but not reckless, generous but never extravagant. This is the type of person that everybody wants to be around and to be like, someone who seems to have mastered the art.
Now, I am just going to bring myself back in here. Always know what to say. I mean, in terms of just saying or speaking in a way that is going to be well received by their audience. Their audience is going to leave feeling good about them and thinking highly of the speaker, diffuse a tense situation, deliver tough news gracefully, confident without being arrogant. I definitely think that there's a lot of people that are very arrogant in the way that they speak assertively, very know-it-all-ish, but nonetheless. Brave but not reckless, generous but never extravagant, and you'll continue to see.
Brave but not reckless, generous but never extravagant. This is the type of person that everybody wants to be around and to be like, someone who seems to have mastered the art of being a person. This may sound like an impossible feat, but Aristotle believed that while rare, these people do exist, and they are what we should all aspire to be. Virtuous. And there's a whole moral theory based on this idea of virtue. But unlike most of the moral theories we've discussed, virtue theory doesn't spend a lot of time telling you what to do. There's no categorical imperative or...
So, yep, the concept of being virtuous, absolutely. But yeah, there's no categorical imperative.
Principle of utility. Instead, virtue theory is all about character. Rather than saying, follow these rules so that you can be a good person, Aristotle and other virtue theorists reasoned that if we can just focus on being good people, the right actions will follow effortlessly. Become a good person, and you will do good things. No rule book needed. So why should you become a virtuous person? Because eudaimonia.
You'll get into eudaimonia later on, but yeah, I think that's very interesting. Just try to be a good person and then you'll end up doing good things. That being said, like I said, I don't necessarily believe that there's an objective morality, but at the same time, I definitely do think that there's a lot in the modern day where there's like a lot of narcissism, essentially, and people really looking out for themselves and what it is that they want, regardless of what it is that other people may want as well. Nonetheless, I am going to try to see what it is that I can do to help make a positive difference in the world with this YouTube channel. And I think that what it is I'm about to introduce here ought to help with that as well. So let's continue to see what is to be said.
Virtue theory reflects the ancient assumption that humans have a fixed nature, an essence, and that the way we flourish is by adhering to that nature. Aristotle described this in terms of what he called proper functioning. Everything has a function, and a thing is good to the extent that it fulfills its function, and bad to the extent that it doesn't.
So good to the extent that it fulfills its function, and bad to the extent that it doesn't. I think that's pretty interesting. Yes, certainly we humans do have a human nature, absolutely, and so I do think that it's important to be mindful of that when operating in general. But nonetheless,
This is easy to see in objects created by humans. A function of a knife is to cut, so a dull knife is a bad knife. And a function of a flower is to grow and reproduce, so a flower that doesn't grow is just bad at being a flower. And the same goes for humans. We're animals, so all the stuff that would indicate proper functioning for an animal holds true for us as well. We need to grow and be healthy and fertile, but we're
I wanted to just try to
for an animal.
Yeah. So same goes for humans. We're animals, absolutely. Even though some people really are not comfortable with that fact. I mean, look, we sleep just like other animals sleep, right? We sleep, we eat, we produce waste. Some of us give birth. I won't go too into that, but some of us give birth, and we don't give birth by laying an egg, that comes out of the stomachs of some people. So, I mean, we're a biological organism where our offspring takes traits from the people that were involved in producing that offspring. I'm being very politically correct here, so don't mind me in that regard, but I'm just really trying to not get myself involved in battles that I don't consider to be necessary, is all. But nonetheless, we are animals.
Holds true for us as well. We need to grow and be healthy and fertile. But we're also the rational animal and a social animal, so our function also involves using reason and getting along with our pack. Now, you might notice that some of this sounds a lot like parts of natural law theory, Aquinas' theory that God made us with the tools we need to know what's good. Well, Aristotle had a strong influence on Thomas Aquinas, so part of Aristotle's thoughts on virtue theory ended up in natural law theory. But for Aristotle, this isn't about God's plan.
And once again, I mean, I know that some of these people did share those beliefs, believing in God, believing in religion. I reinstate, I don't. I'm open to what it is that some of them have to say, but they do lose me in some other areas as well, such as, I mean, the Old Testament had indentured servitude, so there's that, but nonetheless.
It's just about nature. Aristotle argued that nature has built into us the desire to be virtuous, in the same way that acorns are built with the drive to become oak trees. But what exactly does it mean to be virtuous? Aristotle's
I think that's very interesting, this idea that this notion that it is inherent within us humans to be virtuous. I think that's very interesting, but nonetheless.
said that having virtue just means doing the right thing at the right time, in the right way, in the right amount toward the right people. Which sort of sounds like Aristotle saying exactly nothing. I mean, how vague can you be? But according to Aristotle, there's no need to be specific, because if you're virtuous, you know what to do all the time. You know how to handle yourself and how to get along with others. You have good judgment. You can read a room and you know what's right and when. Aristotle understood virtue as a set of robust character traits that one.
So I think that's very interesting in terms of, I do think that there's a certain level of perfection that is being described here. I do think that someone's not always going to make a comment that's going to land that's going to be well received by a particular audience, especially depending on the room or depending on the interaction. I mean, I do think that there's, to some extent, people are going to make statements and that they can not really test the boundaries, but they'll figure out what the boundaries are after whatever statement is said has been said. And excuse me. I also think it's important to make certain rooms as well instead of just reading a room. Excuse me. And so, what I'm just trying to say for that is that I do think that it's nice to be able to have certain rooms that are established where if someone doesn't like what's being said in that room, it's the onus is on them to leave the room as opposed to for them to try to change the room.
Once developed, will lead to predictably good behavior. You can think of virtue as the midpoint between two extremes, which Aristotle called vices. Virtue is just the right amount, the sweet spot between the extreme of excess and the extreme of deficiency. And this sweet spot is known as the golden mean. So let's take a look at some.
I really like that. There's a certain level of everything in moderation. So let's continue.
Particular virtues, starting with courage. What is courage? To take a closer look at this, let's head to the thought bubble for some flash philosophy.
I really like the thought bubble and the way that they use a lot of the animations to reinforce some of the different examples that they want to portray.
Home from a movie, you see a person being mugged. What is the courageous action for you to take? Your impulse might be to say that a courageous person would run over there and stop the mugging because courage means putting yourself in harm's way for a good cause, right? Well, no. A virtuous person, in the Aristotelian sense, would first take stock of the situation. If you size up the mugger and have a good reason to believe that you could safely intervene, then that's probably the courageous choice. But if you assess the situation.
So I like that. I mean, you may excuse me. Wow, it's very unfortunate. You may figure that you might as well try to intervene no matter what. But I also do think that it is necessary to assess the situation as well, as Hank Green is going to be saying.
And recognize that intervention is likely to mean that both you and the victim will be in danger, the courageous choice is not to intervene, but to call for help instead. According to Aristotle, courage is the midpoint between the extremes of cowardice and recklessness. Cowardice is a deficiency of courage, while recklessness is an excess of courage, and both are bad. Aristotle said that you definitely can have too much of a good thing. So being courageous doesn't mean rushing headlong into danger. A courageous person.
So even just on top of that, I can imagine if it is snowing outside and someone wanted to walk outside in flip-flops, flip-flops and a bikini, and it's snowing outside and, it's just particularly cold. I would say that that person's pretty brave. I would say that they're over virtuous and brave in bravery. And then at the same time, like, if someone was so worried about going outside because anything can happen to anybody at any time for no reason. Someone could get capped, if you will, because I'm trying to avoid saying certain words for the sake of just respecting the parameters of YouTube. So someone can get capped, and they could be deleted, they could be removed from this earth, they could be unalived, and they weren't involved in any beef. They got capped because they were walking their dog, so you could imagine in public transport systems and subways and metros, you can imagine like people can run into danger in those situations. And so are you never going to go? I do think that there's a certain level of, frankly, cowardice to never go outside because the safest place for you is at home. And even then, is it really that safe at home as well? Depending on where you are in the world and all of that, but nonetheless, so virtue, and trying to find what would be most appropriate for that situation.
will assess the situation, they'll know their own abilities, and they'll take action that is right in the particular situation. Part of having courage, he argued, is being able to recognize when, rather than stepping in, you need to find an authority who can handle a situation that's too big for you to tackle alone. Basically, courage is finding the right way to act. And a lot of the time, but not all of the time, that means doing a thing that you know you're capable of, even if doing it scares the pants off of you.
If you're taking anatomy and physiology for the first time, I guarantee it's not like any course that you've ever taken. And that's why so many students struggle with it. But
Let me see.
Thanks, Thought Bubble. Aristotle thought all.
So yeah, I apologize for that. I mean, definitely getting YouTube Premium is going to be a goal for me. However, I mean, I want to make some more traction with the YouTube channel as well. So I encourage you to like the video, to subscribe, just leave a comment down as well below, and even share the video with someone else that you think would benefit from this message. I'd really appreciate that. Really, I'm trying to put an effort into growing this YouTube channel here in 2025, just especially given the modern economy in these Western countries and how bad it is, basically.
All virtue works like this. The right action is always a midpoint between extremes. So there is no all or nothing in this theory, even honesty. In this view, honesty is the perfect midpoint between brutal honesty and failing to say things.
So yeah, I definitely do think that, yeah, I've advocated for that before as well, to be honest without necessarily being brutally honest. I don't think that honesty and brutality are intrinsically intertwined.
Things that need to be said. Like, no one needs to be told that they have a big zit on their face. They already know. The virtue of honesty means knowing what needs to be put out there and what you should keep quiet about. And it also means knowing how to deliver hard truths gracefully, how to break bad news gently, or to offer criticism in a way that's constructive rather than soul-crushing. The virtue of generosity works the same way. It avoids the obvious vice of stinginess, but also doesn't give too much. It's not generous.
I wanted to just go back to that one as well, when it's like generosity.
The same way. It avoids the obvious vice of stinginess, but also doesn't give too much.
Yeah, I mean, and at the same time, someone can be taken advantage of if they're too generous as well. Absolutely. And certainly stinginess, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily want to engage with a friend and necessarily be giving everything without getting anything in return, but at the same time I also wouldn't want to not contribute to that as well. And so therefore what it is that I'm trying to say is that I do believe that all relationships are transactional, and I don't think that that's a bad thing, because, or I don't think that that's bad or not ideal, because I certainly think that there's the scales, right? And that the scales ought to not be unbalanced, that they ought to be relatively balanced, and that both people are putting in an effort, or however many entities or parties are involved in the interpersonal dynamic.
Much. It's not generous to give drugs to an addict, or to buy a round of drinks for everyone in the bar when you need that money for rent. The right amount of generosity means giving when you have it to those who need it. It can mean having the disposition to give just for the heck of it, but it also means realizing when you can't or shouldn't give. So now you can see why Aristotle's definition of virtue was totally vague. Where that golden mean is depends on the situation. But if you have to figure out what virtue is in every situation.
So yeah, I definitely think that there's some excellent examples right there.
How could you possibly ever learn to be virtuous? Aristotle thought there was a lot that you could learn from books, but how to be a good person was not one of them. He said that virtue is a skill, a way of living, and that's something that can only really be learned through experience. Virtue is a kind of knowledge that he called a practical wisdom. You might think of it as kind of like street smarts. And the thing about street smarts is that you gotta learn them on the street. But the good news is,
I think to an extent, yes, to an extent, no. I do think that some people definitely have to make their own mistakes. I do think that there's no shortcut for experience to an extent, but I also do think that some people can just tell you, what's going on in a particular situation. I absolutely do believe that. And so what it is that I'm trying to say is that, I do think that it is possible. First of all, with street smarts, I also do think that there's a lot about street smarts that's just about realizing how someone else may be wanting to take advantage of you, and how they may be willing to do whatever it takes to achieve their goal, regardless of the means and regardless of what that may mean for the other person. However the other person may be treated. I also do think that some of this can be told to someone else as well, and that not everyone has to learn the hard way, essentially.
is you don't have to do it alone. Aristotle said your character is developed through habituation. If you do a virtuous thing over and over again, eventually it will become part of your character. But the way you know what the right thing to do is in the first place is by finding someone who already knows and emulating them. These people who already possess virtue are moral exemplars. And according to this theory, we are built with the ability to recognize them and the desire to emulate them. So you learn virtue by watching it and then doing it. In the beginning, it'll be
Sure, and there's some level of monkey see, monkey do. If you don't know, watch someone else who seems to portray the virtue. But at the same time, I also do think that not everybody's going to want to act the same, or not everybody's going to want to be operating the same way as someone else in every single situation. People have different values as well, right? So
be hard and maybe it'll feel fake because you're just copying someone who's better than you at being a good person. But over time, these actions will become an ingrained part of your character. And eventually, it becomes that robust trait that Aristotle was talking about. It'll just manifest every time you need it. That's when you know you have virtue, fully realized. It becomes effortless. Okay, but why? What's your...
I mean, yeah, so I like the points that he's making in general, and that sure, by the time that someone practice makes perfect in a way, and that by the time that somebody gets particularly used to, you know, operating a certain way, it becomes a habit. It becomes second nature, if you will.
Your motivation. What if you have no desire to beat the guy who always says the right thing or the lady who always finds the courage when it's needed? Virtue theory says that you should become virtuous because if you are, then you can attain the pinnacle of humanity. It allows you to achieve what's known as eudaimonia. This is a cool Greek word that doesn't have a simple English translation. You might...
Which I think is very interesting that it doesn't have a simple English translation, but nonetheless.
I'd say it means a life well lived. It's sometimes translated as human flourishing. And the life of eudaimonia is a life of striving. It's a life of pushing yourself to your limits and finding success. A eudaimonistic life will be full of the happiness that comes from achieving something really difficult rather than just having it handed to you. But choosing to live a eudaimonistic life means that you're never done in...
So let's just see just one more time. A life of eudaimonia is a life of striving. It's a life of pushing yourself to your limits and finding success. A eudaimonistic life will be full of happiness that comes from achieving something really difficult rather than just having it handed to you. And I do think that there's a certain level of... Sure, like if it was easy, everyone would be doing it. And so therefore, like some people could take it for granted if it's easy. I also don't think that hard is always just better. I do think that there's such a thing as stupid hard. Some things that are just absolutely ridiculously hard and disproportionately hard, essentially as well. For example, I think that there's a lot of hospitality jobs that are very hard, fast food or just dealing or working in a restaurant, customer service, just working in hospitality that I think is definitely very difficult to do, and that it doesn't really pay that much as well at the same time. And I definitely think that there's jobs that are not as difficult, not as stressful. Someone doesn't have to be like as fast or whatever, but that are easier to that are easier to do essentially, and that pay more as well. You know, I think that someone, generally speaking, who is a content creator is not working as hard as someone in hospitality, and yet content creators typically pay more, for example. So I do think that, there's working hard, working smart. I even heard Dr. K say you can work smart and hard as well. So I do think that there is that as well.
than just having it handed to you. But choosing to live a eudaimonistic life means that you're never done improving. You're never to a point where you can just coast. You're constantly setting new goals and working to develop new muscles. Choosing to live life in this way also means you'll face disappointments and failures. Eudaimonia doesn't mean a life of cupcakes and rainbows. It means the sweet pleasure of sinking into bed at the end of an absolutely exhausting day. It's the satisfaction of knowing you've accomplished.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely like the idea of continuous improvement and being a lifelong learner for sure.
A lot, and that you've pushed yourself to be the very best person you could be. This is morality for Aristotle. It's being the best person you can be, honing your strengths while working on your weaknesses. And for Aristotle, the kind of person who lives like this is the kind of person who will do good things. Today we learned about virtue theory. We studied the golden.
So yeah, I mean, interesting in terms of morality presented from the perspective of Aristotle. I think that that's interesting. Excuse me, and I really do think that Crash Course has a lot to offer, particularly in their philosophy course, which is also going to be very relevant for a lot of what it is that I want to say in future live streams as well. So we'll just finish off with this.
Mean and how it exists as a midpoint between the vices of excess and deficiency. We talked about moral exemplars and the life of eudaimonia that comes with virtuousness. Next time, we're going to consider a tricky little problem in ethics known as moral luck. Crash Course Philosophy is produced in association with PBS Digital Studios. You can head over to their channel to check out a playlist of the latest episodes from shows like PBS Spacetime, Barbecue with Franklin, and PBS.
So definitely just some advertisements over here, you know, but
yes, off book.
Or well, credits, I guess.
This episode of Crash Course was filmed in the Dr. Cheryl C. Kinney Crash Course studio with the help of all of these awesome people, and our equally fantastic graphics team is Thought Cafe.
And so, of course, there's a lot more that they have available, but that essentially is the other video that I would have wanted to show, and pretty much, yeah, okay, I think I'm just going to skip some of this.
If you've been waiting for a sign to try Ready Mag,
I'm just going to leave that alone and bring myself back up here. But that is essentially what it is that I would have wanted to share in terms of, and talk about in terms of rhetoric. So absolutely, there's a lot to be said there in regards to just certainly I do think that there's ways that people use it that's quite sleazy, and sleazier than I would like it to be. And that's another one too, actually. I'll just end off with this. I do think that it's important and ideal for people to speak to use relative terms to just define relativity. So for example, to say that when I was just saying, I do think that people use rhetoric in a sleazy way. Well, I like to say sleazier than what I would like, you know, making it my opinion, but then also using a relative term. So I wouldn't say, you know, for example, that the iPhone 12 is bad and the iPhone 14 is good. I would say that the iPhone 14 is better than the iPhone 12. For example, you know, I like barbecue sauce better than honey mustard. Not barbecue sauce is good and honey mustard is bad. I like vanilla. Vanilla is good and chocolate is bad. Or I like vanilla better than I like chocolate. So using relative terms, even like, you know, oh, the giraffe is big and the mouse is small. Well, the mouse is smaller than the giraffe, you know, because to the mouse, right, relative to the mouse, the human and the giraffe are big, and relative to the giraffe, the human and the mouse are small. So using relative terms to be more neutral, and I think that that is being a lot more linguistically considerate as well. So, with all that being said, I definitely would like to re-encourage you all to take a look at the YouTube channel to subscribe and to take a look at some of the other socials. we're getting more views on this channel, more videos, and more subscribers. So I'm going to try to continue to grind and try to continue to keep at it. But with all that being said, thank you very much for showing up and tuning into and listening to another episode of the It Be What It Be podcast. I hope that you enjoy your weekend, and I am going to aim, I'm not going to say 100%, but I am going to aim to have another live stream next week. Thank you very much and take care.